Have a set of Prismacolors or colored pencils. 24 set is going to give you enough colors to work with. So you can lay that out. You also want a normal number 2 pencil and a kneaded eraser. Everything we draw with the pencil is going to get erased because all we want is color that's left. Let me show you a couple of things here. First of all, if you were to look at a picture like this, now of course you see the background. It's all orange and yellows. Those are warm colors in the background. And what colors do you see on the wolf? Yeah, cool colors. So you've got some blues and purples up in there. Even the gray that you kind of interpret that as gray, if you were to use black, would look kind of funny. And so you use complementary colors like oranges and purples and yellows because they're complements. When they're placed together, they become browns and grays. At least that's the way your eye reads them. What's most important is the value. But still, there's a lot of color in there. There's a little bit of orange. There's a little bit of yellow in there. So when you're drawing and you're using color, you have to really translate the values that you see into colors. And then you have to know what's going to happen to those colors when you lay them down. So for example, if I were to draw this, I'd do some purples and blues up in this, but I'd also do purples and blues up in his grays, and then I'd do some yellows up in there. You'll get greens and oranges and grays. So you get a bunch of colors, and if you really analyze this, I mean, think about all the color that's in there. When you really analyze it, look at all that color that's up in there. Just tons and tons of color. So you've got to get a mindset of color, and that everything's going to be done with color. All the values are going to be done with color. One more picture to show you. In this one, again, this is mostly cool colors. You still have some warm colors in there. But even the horse itself, look at all the purples and blues in the shadows and yellows. And there's even some green up in there because it's reflecting off the green grass onto the horse. So you're going to get a bunch of those colors. When you're drawing with color, you got to be thinking form, lights and darks, and warms and cools. So what I'd like to do with this is let's do it something fairly simple. Let's start out fairly simple and just start out with a sphere. That's the simplest of all forms. So go ahead, about the size of a baseball or so. And then we're going to have a shadow on here too. So let's put in our cast shadow. This is one of the simplest of all forms, but it really does teach a lot when you're doing value and shading. And of course, if you were to triangulate the edge of your shadow, the edge of your object like this, and the edge of your shadow with the edge of your object, it's going to tell you where those converge is where your light source is. And so just right in the middle of that convergence, we know that we're going to have a highlight in there. And we know opposite that highlight, we're going to have that core shadow down in there. So from here, everything that we're going to be drawing is going to be using color. So all I've done is with my pencil, I've got my composition, I've composed it, I put it where I want it to go. I've got my proportions and everything because drawing with color, especially Prismacolors do not erase well. There we go. So now what we need to do is just in the back of your mind think, okay, light is warm. Sunlight is warm. And so we're going to do warm colors in the light side, and reflected light is cool. And so we're going to do cool colors in the shadow side. So as you look at your colors, you want to choose yourself some colors that you like, but that are going to be conducive to whatever it is that we're working on. My yellows, I don't want a real lemony yellow, so there's a lemony yellow. I'm going to kind of pass that one by. There's a yellow orange that's really nice. I like that one. And then there's a goldenrod, which is a dark yellow ochre. I like that one. So those are my lights. And then also, as my lights kind of go into the dark, they're going to go from, and remember the color wheel. So if you go from yellow, you're going to go down into oranges and reds and then finally purples. And then you come back up the other side and go into blues and greens. So you may want to do a yellow-green. And here's where your choice is your choice, whatever you want to do. You can go with the oranges or you could go with the greens. The greens are going to give it more of a cool color, a cool greens and blues and purples. Or you can go with the more warmer tones, the yellow, oranges, reds. So it's totally up to you. I'm going to go with the more warmer tones just because that's kind of me. But you can do it any way you want to. And after a while, you can probably mix them a little bit. It's totally up to you. Let's see. So we've got our warms. Now we need our cools. Blues and purples. I'm going to take the indigo blue. Indigo blue is almost black. But we're not going to do any black at all on this one. Just because we really don't need it. But indigo blue is very dark. So I'm going to use the indigo blue and maybe a blue violet. There's a violet blue that's in there. Or you could go purple. And something for the reflected light. This magenta mulberry, that's what this is, mulberry. So what do we got? 6 colors there? That's probably enough for us. Out of those 6, we can get lots of different colors. So I've got my 2 yellows, a red, indigo blue, and I'm going to save this mulberry for the reflected lights. I think that'll be nice. So, where do we start? Well, the first place we're going to start is with our cast shadow because it's fairly dark. So I'm just going to go into that cast shadow and start coloring it with this indigo blue. You can also use dark purple, any of your darker colors. I've got about 40 colors I really like. I'll buy them individually, and then I make up my own sets of Prismacolors. Then I get the colors that I like and that I want. So this is fairly light. Remember that if you mix your Prismas with your graphite, they get muddy. And so you want to kind of avoid as much graphite as possible. Let me just do some of this dark area there where my core shadow is. I'm going to keep it kind of soft and fuzzy. And I'm going to shift over to this mulberry. You can use mulberry, magenta, anything that's kind of a reddishy purple. I'm just going to do a little bit in there just that to show my edge because I want to get rid of my graphite as much as I possibly can. I'm just going to ever so lightly put an edge in there. And last, on the top, I'm going to do some yellow there just to show my edge. I need my edge in there. And again, I want to get rid of that graphite because it'll turn my colors muddy. I don't want muddy colors. So once I've kind of established where everything goes, I'm going to get rid of my graphite. I'm going to go over the top of my Prismacolor. The Prismacolor will mostly stay there. I mean, some of it will go away. It'll mostly stay there. But the graphite just disappears. I want to get rid of all that graphite. Now it's there. The color is there. There's no graphite that you have to worry about. I get rid of as much of that graphite as you can. Now, if you want to skip the graphite step, you could. You could just draw directly with your Prismas. But most people are not comfortable with that because, you know, what if I make a mistake? So now I'm going to work with my yellow and just ever so lightly. Remember, your highlight is white. It should always be white. Now, if you were drawing on gray board or black board, you'd have to add that white in there and the dark. So just ever so lightly using that yellow. You could use any of those yellows you want. My favorite is called Yellow Ochre, and it's not in the set of 24. I wish it were. That's another one that I buy a lot of. Yellow Ochre, Poppy Red, Cream. Those are your basic flesh tones. Since I draw a lot of people, those are the colors that I use. I'm going to go over some of that with this Spanish orange. Spanish orange. Because it's kind of yellow. I don't know if you guys have ever done any research on color. But typically, in the good old days, your yellows were a little more orange. So now I'm going to take that violet blue. I'm going to go over some of that and watch what happens if I go over my yellow with that. You get a different color. Sometimes it feels a little green, sometimes it feels gray. So you get this kind of different color over there. It's just not as bright and vibrant. We're going to make it bright and vibrant later on, but right now we just want that nice. We're just going to go mostly in the core area. Going to leave a little bit of edge for your reflected light. Come back into that with the magenta or the mulberry. I also am going to go into my cast shadow using this blue violet, and it's just going to go over the top of that indigo blue and just make it a little prettier. When you're dealing with colors, it's all about beauty. It's all about that vibrant, bright, beautiful color. But it's really not about color. It's about value. The cool colors, excuse me, blues and purples are usually a little darker. And the more you draw, the more you layer, you're going to have to start pressing harder and harder. And as you do, those colors are going to blend themselves and be very smooth. I always get asked, how do you get your colors so smooth? This is how. You layer them in. If you start out too heavy, then your colors get kind of streaky. And I may want to go back into my core shadow and really darken that up a little bit. I like a nice, rich, darker core shadow. So the reason I pulled these colors out too is when you limit yourself with the colors, number one, you know exactly which colors you have to work with. And so you're not guessing, oh, did I use blue there? Did I use green there? Because as you start mixing your colors, you're going to get colors that you didn't intend to get. Sometimes it's a happy accident. You just go, oh, there's green in there. How'd I get green? But that's part of the beauty of it as well. So when you limit yourself, you just kind of know what colors you used, and then you're not guessing. You're not going back and forth and going, oh no, that wasn't the right color. You just do it. Now, in order to blend this, I want a nice transition from my yellow to my blue, and so I'm going to use a little bit of that red. Now the red I've chosen, this is called Poppy Red. It's actually a little orangey red, and it's not that bright fire engine red, so it's going to blend very well with the orange. But as it gets into the blue, it's going to darken up a little bit. Gray out maybe is the word. But that's okay. So I'm just going to go over that kind of area there and just kind of blend that in. That gives me a nice transition. Remember that the neutral colors, there's two neutral colors, yellow, green, and red, violet. And those will help you transition from the warm to the cool. So as we're drawing with color, and you're going to be using this color to draw something over the weekend, hopefully you'll think about it a little bit and say, you know what, I really want to draw a car or a flower or, you know, a horse or something. We're going to do it with color. And sometimes when you're drawing with color, you think, wow, this is wild and crazy colors. But it looks fine because your values are correct. And the more color, the better. Remember, we're creating art, not photographs. Let a camera do the photographs. So now I'm going to use magenta in here, which is kind of a reddish purple. And so I've gone from my red orange to my red purple. And as I go into that, your purples are going to look a little redder, and your red's going to look a little, or your orange is going to look a little redder. It's an odd way of creating colors. You know, your printers understand this. So you've only got 3 colors in your color printers. Cayenne, which is kind of a warm blue. And then you've got magenta, which is kind of a purpley red. But you start mixing that with your yellows, and then you get all sorts of different colors. The idea is to be very versatile with your colors. So now I've got my reflected light in there, and it's nice and kind of a reddishy purpley kind of color. I may even want to take some of that mulberry or magenta, whichever you're using, and mix it into my cast shadow, especially on the edges where reflected light kind of starts to get into those. And I may even want to just smooth out my edges with that mulberry, have them nice and kind of that nice reddishy purpley kind of color. And the camera, I tell you what, this looks a whole lot better back here than it does up there. Because the camera, there's so much color, and the camera doesn't quite know what to do with all that color. The human eye is much better at picking out colors than cameras are. So for this, it looks okay, but now we need that contrast. We need some dark darks. We've got our lights. We've got our highlights, our light side here. Now we need to really make it punch. We need some better contrast. So we need some darks. And I'm going to remember one of the rules of value is the shadow's darker near your object. So right near the object, I'm adding some pressure to that. Not a lot of pressure, but if I needed more pressure, I could add more pressure. But what it's doing also is it's starting to build up all that color, and you can start smoothing out that color and making it much smoother and nicer. More opaque, if you will. If you like to draw, you should have some, good tools with you. One of the tools I like to have with me is, so I've got my little Altoids box, but I like these little hand sharpeners. Just because my Prismacolors wear out so much and I like a point, so I like to keep that hand sharpener around. So you may want to grab one of those, put it in with your Prismas. It's always good to have the right tools on hand. So that contrast, that dark really helps that to pop. Now we need some in that core shadow there. We did start out with indigo blue. We're going to kind of end with indigo blue. And so I want to increase that a little bit, not as much as my cast shadow. That area is going to be our darkest area. But I do want to increase that core just a little bit. Again, it's a matter of pressure. Sometimes you want more, sometimes you want less. And for this, again, you can use any colors you want. But some of my basics, some of my favorites, my standbys that I always go to, indigo blue, I still want to keep some of that reflected light that's in there. And maybe, because I look at my indigo blue and think, it's a little dull, maybe I want to make it a little prettier for a color, I can go back over that with purple. I like purple. This blue violet might be good enough to go back over. And that also is going to blend all those colors that I've already layered into it. A little bit of pressure in there and just blend some of those together. And this works for just about everything that I can think of. I mean, you can draw with color, and it doesn't matter what your subject matter is. You can make it look beautiful as long as your values are correct. So this is what I call warm cool. You've got your warm side with your yellows and oranges and reds, and your cool side in your shadow areas with your blues and purples. So that's very, very basic. Let's try something that is maybe a little more complex. I'd like to do an eye or a nose or something and talk about flesh tones, but the same thing happens. I mean, you could draw a person using blues and purples, all the colors that we've used here, and it's going to look okay. So let's try it.